Hi, welcome to Transform and Thrive. I'm your host, Jessalin Lam, and this series is all about uncovering the stories of transformation, resilience, and growth that inspire us to embrace change and thrive in our lives. In each episode, I sit down with trailblazers who have turned challenges into opportunities, sharing their pivotal lessons and mindset shifts that have led to their transformation. Today's guest is Kat Richards. Welcome, Kat.
Thank you.
She is a strategic leader and systems thinker, transforming how we experience healthcare and finance. With over 13 years spanning customer experience, product strategy, and inclusive innovation, she's helped Fortune 500s and mission driven brands turn human insight into impact, from equitable hiring in corporate America to reshaping hormonal health journeys for women. Equal parts systems thinker and roll up your sleeves doer, Kat maps fuzzy problems into actionable roadmaps and leads end to end service design that spans in person, digital, and everything in between. And as an associate director of experience strategy at Digitas, Kat leads with empathy and action, bridging strategy, design, and tech to reimagine care delivery. Outside of work, she mentors underrepresented talent globally and serves as a vocal advocate for health equity, mental health, and the financial gaps that hold communities back. So, whether you're navigating a challenge or seeking motivation to take the next step, you'll find so much inspiration today. So, let's dive in. Welcome again, Kat. Really happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we'll go into the first question on transformation. Can you share a significant challenge or turning point in your life that became a catalyst for transformation?
Yeah, absolutely. So you kind of mentioned this already in my intro, but I have, a decade of experience working in advertising from CPG, B2B, travel and tourism. And I think the changing moment for me in my career was really over the pandemic, thinking about my skill sets, what I can bring to the table. And for me, it was how can I use those skill sets for good and how can I make an impact for other people, right? And that to me meant how can I support marginalized communities in spaces that need it the most? And that is everyday things like finances, like healthcare, right? And so that's really what inspired me to get into that space, really thinking about how do we break down financial literacy, to building generational wealth, to having the right words to advocate for yourself in healthcare situations.
Great. Oh, well, thanks for sharing that. And I can imagine there's a lot of challenges even trying to navigate that. What was the biggest challenge you faced during this period, or like how did you overcome it?
Yeah, I mean, as a first gen immigrant, I think the biggest one, and you'll probably hear this phrase quite often, it's just overcoming imposter syndrome.
Mhm.
I don't like to use that word to describe myself anymore, only because I think it's also not just on us as individuals. I think it's also on the system, right? And how it's not set up for us to flourish, for us to be empowered, and really just having to constantly navigate how can I be seen? How can I be heard without really going into code switching a lot? And it's also a lot of unlearning of, my upbringing too, right? As a Chinese American, we were always taught, be humble, keep your head down, and just do your work, and that will speak for itself. So really trying to find that balance between how can we be successful in careers like advertising, as well as still, paying respect to my cultural upbringing without losing myself.
I love that you don't use that word anymore. I also try not to use it. So when people talk about it, I'm like, no, like I just think about it differently, or like so that leads me to my next question because when you're thinking about there's a lot of mindset shifts that need to happen. So I'm curious to hear from you, like what mindset shifts or realizations have helped you move forward and grow.
I think there's a lot of things, right? But I do want to circle back for a minute. I think part of pivoting into a different industry in finance and healthcare from like consumer packaged goods and like travel is really understanding that I'm not starting over. I think that was the hardest hurdle for me. It felt like I was starting over because I was going into a space I knew nothing about, right? And really understanding actually what I know here is transferable. And it's really thinking about how do I retell that story and how do I reframe my mindset differently so that I don't think I'm taking a few steps back and it's just a sidestep, right? And really starting a new path and forming that for myself. But to your question on, mindset shift, that is definitely one way to think about it. It's not just, it's challenging what I was taught growing up and then asking myself, is that still accurate? Does that
Mhm.
still help me in the situation? And if it doesn't, how do I rethink about this in a different way instead of continuously just carrying that forward to future generations without even, questioning it or just blindly obeying? I think that's one thing that I'm also hoping to ingrain into my son as well. Like, don't just blindly obey. Like, it's okay to question it and it's okay to ask questions, right? Like, and talk about it and really understand, is this adding value to my life? And if not, what do I do with this information?
Right, and then learning to let go of it too. It doesn't serve you.
Yeah. And I think another unlearning too, like you actually do a really good job helping me on, is understanding that I don't have to do it on my own. Asking for
Mm,
help. Asking for help is so hard for me, especially as a first gen, immigrant daughter, firstborn daughter. I was taught to just figure it out, just
yeah,
do it on your own. And I always do, right? And so that's kind of been like my motto in life. It's like, I don't know how to do this, but I'll figure it out. But, now it's really pausing, realizing I can actually ask people to help me. I can actually show weakness and that's all right, right?
right.
That's a big shift for my mindset as well. Understanding that
Mm,
I don't need to do it all myself, and that it's okay to ask for help.
right. That's a really important one. That's a lot of that leads to even the next question of like learning lessons. So I'm curious, like, were there moments of mistakes or failure along the way? And how did you learn from them?
I think failure is an interesting word. I wouldn't use that to describe it because I think every
Mm,
misstep, if you will, throughout like my life, my career, I think it was a good learning moment, especially now when I think back on it and when I reflect on it, right? I think that to the point of asking for help, I think it's also realizing not every problem is mine to carry. Um, being again a firstborn daughter, like being the older sibling, I always felt this obligation to my younger sister, to my cousins, like if there was a problem, and that kind of bleeds into work life as well, right? When someone comes up to you with a problem, I felt like I had to help them. I felt that obligation. And now it's really thinking about, okay, I hear the problem. Do you want me to just sit with this information? Do you want me to consult? Do you want my advice? Right. And then really leaving that conversation where it's at and not taking that mental toll with me afterwards. Um, that was a big, big learning lesson as well, understanding that I don't have to solve it for everybody to the point where I
mhm.
have to burn myself out.
That's a really good one. I feel like my therapist just reminded me of that today too, where we don't have to be the
A hard
fixer of
lesson.
every problem that we see out
Yeah.
there. That's a good reminder. Well, and then you also mentioned about asking for help, and that's huge. And it reminds me of even just that need for community. So for you, like who has supported or like what supported you during your own transformation?
Oh, so many people. I will start with like the smaller, closer group first. So my husband, my family,
Hmm.
absolutely having that support there has been really helpful. Even just someone that I can rant to and talk through, like, okay, this is what's bothering me, right? And just clearing the air has been nice.
Yeah.
Um, Badass Mamas group, the one that you started, has also
Yeah.
been really nice to just have folks that I can share both career, professional, perspectives, as well as just like personal things, what's going on as we navigate motherhood. And then I also have a close knit of mentors and sponsors that I can rely on as well to kind of challenge my thinking. They bring in very different perspectives and different experiences. And so that's been able to kind of open my eyes a little bit more.
That's great. And glad to hear you have so many different kinds of connections to really help support you.
Yeah.
Well, then going on to like habits, because that's always important of like what we're doing on a day to day. Curious, like what are some practical steps or habits that have helped you thrive like during your own transformation?
That's a really good question. Um, I'll start with one that comes top of mind for me. And this one actually you encouraged me to keep doing, which is taking the time to journal. I've
Mm,
never been good at slowing down to reflect.
yep, I
And
know that.
so journaling is something that helps me like slow down, right? So I do actually make time now on the calendar. Like I block like 15 minutes in the morning when I'm drinking my coffee to be like,
Mm,
okay, I need to like just brain dump. I need to journal if something's bothering me, what's like on my mind, just to kind of clear that headspace so that I'm ready for what's to come for the day. Um, I think another thing that I wouldn't necessarily call like a habit, but just being more intentional on what I say yes to, right? Um,
mhm.
making sure that something that I'm agreeing to doing is something that I full on 120% feel ready and passionate for. And if it's not that, then it's a no for me. Um, and just letting rest be part of my life, right? And celebrating that rest is okay. Because as I mentioned to you, like slowing down is hard for me. And so
Mhm.
rest is part of that, right? And it doesn't feel productive, even though it is, right? Rest
Yeah.
is needed. And so I think it's also just reminding myself like rest is also part of that. You need to actually embrace rest and make time for rest.
That's great. And I'm glad to hear you're journaling to slow down and reflect because it's a great way to like really pause and like appreciate it
Yeah.
and reflect on everything going on. And even just you're saying about what you're saying yes to, I think it is like a really healthy habit because it sounds like you're aligning to your values and then seeing if it's aligned to that before you decide to move forward. So that's actually a really great like thriving habit. And then the rest is important. There's so many different, like I recently learned about the seven different types of rest. And then
Hmm.
I started reading the book, it's The Sacred of Rest. That is the person who created the seven types of rest. I think it's really important because it's not just sleeping. There's different kinds of rest that our body needs, whether it's like creative, social, emotional, or so really listening to our body is helps us be productive.
Yeah. And especially as a mom of toddler, like sensory rest is so needed too. Like
Mm,
sometimes I just need to sit in silence in the dark and just like
yeah.
let me just like put my nervous system down for a minute because it's been on like intensity for the entire day on like a weekend or something.
Overstimulation. Yeah, I
I
know.
just need a minute. But you're right. Understanding the different types of rest and knowing when you need what has been really helpful for me to like think about how do I refill my cup, right? Because sometimes it
Mhm.
could be a creative rest and like having an outlet to do that. And other times it's just, I just need a walk. I need a physical, re-engagement with my body and like movement helps with that.
Yeah, and I shout out to you. I feel like you support my types of rest where creative rest, I'm thinking of like Lego building and like fun little hobbies, which
Yeah,
I
I
think is
am a huge
helpful.
Lego fan, so I'm glad I was able to get another Lego fan out here.
Well, then I want to go into defining what thriving means to you. Like, so now that we've talked about transformation, how that's shaped you, what does thriving mean to you personally?
It's such a funny question because I think if you asked me this 5 years ago, I would have given you my parents' definition of success,
Mm,
right? Which is like
mm.
big house, big title, big salary, right? Making it to the top of corporate America, like being like the lead and doing all the things. And I think there's still a part of me that has that unlearning, right? Because there's still a part of me that thinks that as like the
Mhm.
goal, as ambitious, right? But I think it's also finding time and flexibility is what thriving means to me now, in addition to that, right? So it's how do I spend my time? Do I have the ability to choose how I spend that time? Is it thriving in a project that I'm leading? Is it thriving in being able to take a mini vacation with my family? Is it thriving in taking time for myself, going to a cafe, enjoying a pastry and a nice cup of coffee and just people watching, right? Or partnering with a nonprofit because their values align with mine and I want to do something to make a difference. So I think thriving now is flexibility and the freedom to choose how I get to spend that time.
Yeah, and like it sounds like also just really enjoying your life, being present, and living your values every day, and that can look different depending on what you want to focus on.
I love that breakdown.
Yeah. And then I do want to move on to, because I know I'm guilty of this, like living in autopilot, and sometimes we don't have that time or don't prioritize to pause and like be intentional. So, like, I want to also talk about celebrating yourself. how do you celebrate or acknowledge your growth and success?
I'm laughing because this is such a hard one for me.
Yes, and I know.
Like, I mean, to the theme of, we talked about this earlier, I'm not good at slowing down and I'm getting better at it. I'm getting for sure better at pausing and finding moments of rest in my life, right?
Yeah.
But pausing to celebrate myself is a big jump. And it's funny because I love celebrating other people, especially with
Mhm.
like the Badass Mamas group. Like I'm here. I'm the best cheerleader for folks. And yet when I think about how do I celebrate myself, it feels really braggy.
Mm,
And there's that like mindset shift that I need to take, right? It's really learning like there's a way to do this in a humble manner and still celebrate yourself because you're not sharing to get like kudos. You're sharing because you're proud of your achievements,
right.
whether that is like something actionable or like I took time to rest. That is also an achievement. And so I think it's reflecting on that and again, pausing to think through that on like a weekly basis or a quarterly basis, really thinking about what have I done? What impact have I made? And how far have I come? Right? Because
Mhm.
I used to do these reflections on a quarterly basis and like what impact have I made? Only so that I can think about, okay, but what's next? And now it's what impact have I made? And look at all of these things I've done. And so it's like I do the same thing, but I just do it in a different, order, like understanding, okay, I did all of these things. I should be proud and I should share it with other people so that they can enjoy it with me.
And also add it to your daily journaling that you're doing.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and then I also like to always ask, like, what are some resources? So, like, habits, tools, or resources that have helped you when it comes to maintaining momentum during your own journey?
This is a good one because, as you know, I'm very type A, so I have a lot of resources.
Yes.
I think starting with a passion planner is definitely one that I have consistently used for the past like 5 years now.
Oh,
I always have
amazing.
this with me.
I love that.
Not sponsored, but you should probably ask them if you can sponsor it. But I love the passion planners because they break it out in such a nice, tangible way, right? The book usually starts with like the beginning of a year, what's your mind map? What are your goals? And then you
Hmm.
break down one goal that you want to actually achieve by the end of the year. And you kind of start thinking about, okay, what can I do to get to this goal? What are little things that I need to do that? And then
Yeah.
they'll ask on a monthly basis to reflect, how have you used your time? Is it intentional? And is it getting you closer to where you're trying to go with your goal? Right. And then they'll ask you again to evaluate mid-year, like how far have you made it? Has
Hmm.
anything changed? And are you okay with pivots? Right. Like they also embrace that. So that's been really nice to keep track of like, these are the things I want to achieve. These are the things I want to accomplish, whether that's rest, whether that's spending time with family, whether that's doing XYZ, right?
Yeah.
And then having a plan to measure against that. That's been one of the biggest habits that I've picked up the past 5 years. That's been really helpful for me to stay focused. And then, as I mentioned, journaling, blocking time to do that so that I can actually reset, do a brain dump, think through like, okay, what's on my mind and what's, blocking my day. But on top of that, it's also thinking about how do I plan through what my day looks like. So, like I said, being a type A, I like to kind of go through top 3 items that I must tackle the day. And when I say that, I mean top 3 things that I absolutely need to do, not necessarily nice to haves, and not necessarily items that people want of me or they expect of me to do. Especially if it's ones that don't bring me joy. If it's things that I can outsource, I'm not doing it and it's not going to be on my list. So even like understanding that and prioritizing, okay, these are the things I need to focus on today, has been helpful. And then using that list to time block my calendar so that I don't take on more than I can actually chew.
That's amazing. And you do that every morning?
I usually do that on Sunday, so I have a week's
Oh, for the
view
week.
already of like this is what the things I need to get done. How much of it do I get done? Which one gets like pushed to like 3 weeks from now because it's not urgent and it's like self-inflicted timelines.
Got it.
You're
That's
like, oh my
amazing
God.
because then you're really setting yourself up for success. And even as you were sharing your resources, I wanted to share another one for people because for me, I used to use the passion planner, and for some reason, it just hasn't stuck to work for me.
Yeah.
Because so that I actually have been using the what is it, the 5 minute journal. And that's literally only one page because for me,
Oh,
that's
okay.
all my brain can can do. Like the planning is like sometimes overwhelming for me. So like the
Yeah.
one page with the 5 minute journal is really amazing because it asks you like what is what are three things you're grateful for? So then you're
Mm.
starting the day with that. Then you focus on what's going to make today ideal, three things.
Oh,
So
I
then you're
love that.
setting that up for success for your day. And then you write in your affirmation for the day. And then in the evening, you come back to the journal and write what were the three highlights. So that's, it could either be celebrating yourself or celebrating
Yeah.
something that happened. And then the last question is, what did I learn today? And so I've been starting that the past, like last year I started using it and then I'm using it again this year. And it's been really helpful to like train my brain of like, okay, this is what I'm gonna do like today and like be grateful for, even if things are shitty and not going well, like I'm
Yeah.
focusing on like the gratitude and the positive.
I
Yeah.
love that. I also love that you start with like the morning day reflection and then you circle back to it at the end to reflect.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
think that's something that I need to do more of because I do a lot more like journaling in the morning, but there's not like a
So then
closing.
the day escapes, and then you're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, yeah. Well, I am
Right.
guilty. I will share with this because I'm all about like progress instead of perfection. So like there's many days that, and maybe this is a new habit I ended up creating. Many days I forget to go back to at night. So
Mhm.
then what I do is in the morning, I'll reflect on my day and then go back to be like, how was yesterday? And then I reflect on that and still fill that page out. So like
Yeah.
that's still a way of like a workaround.
I was gonna ask you how many pages are empty.
It's been actually pretty good. I just
That's good.
restarted this habit, I would say, like in July when my sister gifted it to me for my birthday because I was like, oh, I need a new one. So that's been a new habit, and it's a real healthy exercise to help me thrive.
Yeah, I love that. I love
Yeah.
that.
Well, so the last question I wanted to ask is like advice. Like, what is one message, mantra, or advice that you'd like to leave people with, especially those who are struggling to take that first step toward their own transformation?
Yeah. I think it's taking time to take care of yourself, slowing
Mm,
down and listening to your body, right? And
yeah.
really understanding what is it that you want and are you headed that direction, right? Like everything that you do should be getting you closer to what is it that you want. And if it's not, then it's time to stop and think about like, okay, how do I pivot, right? So taking time for yourself is definitely my advice.
That's a good one. And something that I've been really into lately is also listening to like what's nourishing your mind, body, like soul and heart, because it's like the whole person that you have to take care of, where we take care of our body, but then what else are we doing for your mind? Or are you listening to what your heart is telling you? And spirit, depending on what aligns, it could even just be meditation of, so there's different ways to like play around and experiment with that.
Yeah. I will say another thing too, which again feels like the opposite of being a type A person, but you don't need a full plan to do something. I think that
Mm,
was a mindset shift for me, especially just having a general idea and then just going for it and then doing a lot of trial and error and seeing what happens. And then of course asking for help, right? That's been helpful. Instead of just really having that analysis paralysis to be like, okay, these are all the things that I could do. I need a full
hmm.
out plan to figure out how I'm going to do it, right? Other times it's also just realizing like, actually, I don't need a full out plan. I needed to trust my gut and like this is the direction I want to go. Generally, let's see what happens. Let's see how
That's
it
a good one because an audiobook that I'm listening to is called Tiny Experiments. And that one talks about like how can you test something out like trial and error and make it an experiment and then learn from it because then it makes it more easier to do. So like instead of saying I'm going to write a book, it's like okay, I'm going to experiment and I'm going to start writing like 2 hours for the next 7 days and
Mhm.
then test it out along the way so that you can like actually take action. So that focuses more on the momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can learn too to see if that's even something you want, right?
Hmm. Right. Well, thank you so much for joining. It was a really inspirational conversation. Really happy to have you on today's episode. And it's a reminder for everyone listening that transformation really begins when we embrace our challenges, learn from setbacks, and take action to really move forward, even if it's little baby steps towards the goals and what you want to be working on. So I really appreciate you joining today on Transform and Thrive. And so, for everyone listening, if today's episode resonated with you, please give it a thumbs up, share it with anyone who could benefit from hearing Kat's story, and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much.
Thank you.